This series, the HUD Energy Lunch and Learn series, is intended to be a resource for HUD staff and stakeholders to learn about topics related to growing our capacity in energy efficiency and renewable integration, with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, achieving cost savings, and improving the quality of life for residents. We had our first meeting in May 2023 on the Inflation Reduction Act. If any of you did not receive the recordings or the slide deck for that meeting and are interested in receiving that, please just identify yourself in the chat and we can be sure to get those out to you. As well as if you would like to receive invitations for future meetings, please just identify that in the chat and we'd be happy to invite you to meetings going forward. This meeting is intended to coincide with the recent publication of EPA's Solar For All NOFO, and that is a $7 billion opportunity for HUD stakeholders to execute solar projects. So we have an impressive array of best practices to share with you today from Robert Havlicek of the Housing Authority of the County of Santa Barbara, Alejandro Salgado Colon, the administrator of Puerto Rico Public Housing Administration, joined by Antonio Cordova of the HUD Puerto Rico Field Office, Robert Capoletti of the Meriden, Connecticut Housing Authority, and Charles Marshall of the HUD Energy Branch. After the presentations, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis Pelosi, Climate Advisor to the Secretary for opening remarks. Okay, so if Alexis was delayed, I'll just read some of the remarks we were going to deliver prior to the speakers. This meeting is, of course, the second meeting of the Energy Lunch and Learn series. And this is a series, intended to make you aware of the opportunities of the Inflation Reduction Act and help increase your capacity for using those funds. The Inflation Reduction Act is a historic investment in this work available to HUD stakeholders through its tax incentives, grant, and rebate programs that support this work. In total, the Inflation Reduction Act provides $18 billion in federal grants and $36.5 billion in tax credits over the next 10 years in housing-related provisions. One of the EPA programs under the IRA, Solar for All, opened a NOFO on June 28th. Yeah. This meeting on Solar Today was planned to coincide with the publication of that NOFO. This is a grant program for solar deployment worth $7 billion, and we encourage you as you listen to the materials presented in this meeting to keep an eye out for whether you would like to take that opportunity to apply to Solar for All. Please keep in mind, if you are interested in applying to Solar for All, that you must file a notice of intent to apply by the deadline. And after that, you submit your application, but you will not be able to submit an application if you have not previously filed a notice of intent to apply. So I'm going to make you aware of those deadlines right now. They are July 31st, 2023 for states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. August 14th, 2023 for territories, municipalities, and eligible nonprofit recipients, and August 28th, 2023 for tribal governments and intertribal consortia. We will also put in the chat and out for you guys the information on the NOFO so that you can read the NOFO for yourself. I see that Alexis has now joined, so I'm going to turn it over to her for some remarks and to welcome you all to the event. And after that, we will start with our speakers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I apologize for being a little late. I was speaking to some young interns in our office here at HUD headquarters. And as you can imagine, in talking to young people about climate and the great work that we are doing here at HUD, it ran a little bit over, but very excited to be here and to welcome everyone to the Lunch and Learn. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Jennifer for all of her work in putting this together and for putting together the other Lunch and Learns. It is part of HUD's overall effort to really be engaging more on the climate space and providing information and education on the important opportunities that are coming down under the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the CHIPS Act and other things, and how those funding opportunities can be used within HUD programs to support HUD properties, HUD communities, and most importantly, to benefit HUD residents and participants of our program. And so, with that, I will turn it over, but just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has come on today. This is part of an ongoing effort, from HUD to make sure that you have the information and the knowledge that you need to be able to understand the program opportunities that are coming down, the funding opportunities to provide help and support as you're looking to do this critical and important work. And so with that, we'll turn it over to Jennifer, if you turn it back over to you or to the first speaker.
Sure. Just turning it over to the first speaker, I want to just notify everyone that we have built a site called Build for the Future. And that site and the QR code will be in Charles Marshall's presentation. And that site will have a funding navigator for all the IRA and BIL programs loaded onto it in about a month, and has a plethora of resources for building your capacity in renewable energy and energy efficiency and resiliency. So we hope you take a look at that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over and ask Nora Parsons to load the presentation for our first speaker, who will be Alejandro Salgados Colon from the Puerto Rico Public Housing Administration, joined by Antonio Cordova of the HUD Puerto Rico Field Office. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was my fault. Our first speaker will be Bob Havlicek of the Housing Authority of the County of Santa Barbara. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. As we're waiting for the slide to hopefully the slides will be back up shortly here. Perfect. Great. So first of all, Jennifer, thank you for the invitation to present, and we're excited to be a part of this process and really excited about the funding opportunities that are ahead of us as well. This presentation is about a project that we did nearly a decade ago, and I think the underlying message before we get into the details of it is what is possible when you can cobble together a variety of funding sources. So I hope you find this presentation interesting. And just a little bit of background about the Housing Authority of the County of Santa Barbara. We have a voucher program of about 4,000 vouchers. We originally had 500 plus public housing units, so we were considered a mid-size agency. We've been disposing of our properties through RAD, and we actually hope to be complete by the end of this year of transforming all of our properties outside of the public housing program. We are active developers, and we now own and manage roughly 1,500 units throughout the county of Santa Barbara itself. So that just gives you a sense of the size of our agency and the work that we do. And we are unusual in the sense that we are developers ourselves. We sometimes partner with for-profit developers, but we primarily develop properties utilizing low-income housing tax credits and other funding sources. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the project that we're presenting to you today here is something that we did, again, about 10 years ago. And there was a convergence of a variety of funding sources that allowed us to do a retrofit project. It was quite an undertaking. 21 of our developments were retrofitted with solar. It represented 863 units. 95% of the solar is generated to power the consumption needs of the dwelling units. And then the balance of it, the 5%, is for all the common areas. It was a project that had 157 structures. The county of Santa Barbara actually is in 3 utility jurisdictions, so it presented some interesting challenges in working with 3 different groups. PG&E, Southern California Edison, and the city of Lompoc had its own municipal utility organization. So our target was to produce 100% of the tenant energy consumption needs. And in fact, it was not only the consumption needs of the residents, but also the common area space as well. So next slide, please. So in terms of system size, it was 1.7 megawatts of DC power generation. Annual production, as you can see, is 2.6 million kilowatt hours. It was 7,300 panels, and you can see that we used a combination of different types of inverters depending upon the individual application. Next slide, please. Okay, so they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we'll spend a little time with this particular slide, because this is really the essence of what it took to do this this project. We formed a captive energy company, and it's called Surf Solar Company. It's a nonprofit. And then Surf Solar Enterprises is a for-profit entity that's wholly owned by the nonprofit. We structured it that way so that we could cobble together a variety of funding sources in order to make the project work. And I'll provide with you in a later slide some of the information related to this. But essentially, the Housing Authority, in forming these, there was a convergence of funding sources available. In the state of California, there was what was called the MASH program, Multi-Family Affordable Solar Housing. And then HUD had some incentives for us, so we took advantage of those. And then, as many of you know, there's a solar investment tax credit. And during the time that we actually did this project, there was some 1602 funds available. So we captured that out of the Department of Treasury in lieu of finding an investor. So we cobbled all of these different sources together in order to fund the systems that we installed on each of the buildings. And then we, in turn, so the system panels are actually owned by, and the inverters are owned by, the captive energy company. And then we drafted purchase power agreements for each of the properties. Those PPAs allowed us to charge a small amount of fee per kilowatt hour, in fact, less than half of what the utility companies were charging. And that was enough to fund the operation of the maintenance of the panels and the inverters and so on. And then the property benefited by having a reduced energy bill. So this was a large-scale project for us, and it was pretty involved. We had some physical challenges with the installation of the panels. We also had challenges with each of the utility companies, because in those days, when you were doing large-scale multifamily, they really were not, the utility companies were not geared towards the engineering requirements very well, so it wasn't an efficient process. I think over time, the utility companies have streamlined the process. And then there was some legal challenges with the structure of all of this. So we worked with a specialized attorney. So we had a very strong team that allowed us to move forward. And of course, we selected a solar installer who was willing to and had the capacity to do a large scale project for us. So in essence, this slide really captures the essence of the structure in order to make it work. And so with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, on the legal aspects of it, there was some formation of new entities and some document filing associated with that. So again, we worked with special counsel in order to form the captive energy company. Next slide, please. And then the financial considerations, we had a construction loan and permanent loan, rebate applications, and then the billing for the power generated for each of the properties. So when we set this up, we had a very interesting system where of course, the inverters are converting DC to AC so that it can be used at the property or connected back to the grid. But we had to have a billing system in place to capture the power that was generated and then bill accordingly. So we put an IT system in place where we have access points that capture the data from each of the inverters, and it connects back to the internet so we can capture real time the data required to see what the energy generation is for each of our properties. So there's quite a bit to consider, and that's really what this slide is all about. When you're doing a large scale project like this, you need to take into consideration the various aspects of the financing. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit about the physical aspects. It was 157 buildings. With that, your solar installer needs to provide you with a plan that makes sense. And so each property is unique. Some sites have a lot more space than others. To the extent that our site is not constrained, we like to put solar on carports. However, if your site is constrained for land, we do put solar on our buildings. And I would say that the method of construction today is good to prevent leaks and so on. We also had some other interesting things that came up, because if you live in an area where there's birds that like to nest, we put in some specialized netting so that the space between the panel and the roof is closed off, so it doesn't accumulate trash and or leaves, but also prevents birds from nesting, particularly doves. So there's some technical considerations. The distance from the panels to meters is probably the most important. You've got and your solar installer would definitely understand this. DC only travels so far, so where your panels are to meters and as well as the inverters, all of that matters in incorporating your design. And so you really want to work with a solar installer who understands the nuances with a larger scale solar installation. Next slide, please. So operations of the panels, we have 7,300 panels from this initial set of 21 properties, And so our maintenance staff was concerned about, well, who's going to clean the panels? We actually hire a company that specializes in cleaning the panels and also reviews, inspects all of the inverters as well as the panels for any damage, and then alerts us. And when you're structuring your project, you want to consider funding a reserve so that you have funds available that will allow you to repair and replace anything along the way that is needed. And in our experience, we have very little damage to the inverters or the panels. And of course, they're under warranty anyway for a period of time. And so really the key is the periodic inspections, which in our case comes with the firm that does the cleaning of our panels. And so we have a system in place where it hasn't impacted the time needed by our maintenance crew, and we're able to keep solar production maximized. But working with your IT department is really critical in order to capture the data to monitor the production of power. Next slide, please. Okay, so we formed a single purpose entity to qualify for, it was a 1603 grant. I think I mentioned earlier it was 1602. It's actually, at that time, it was a 1603 grant. It provided the housing authority with flexibility in terms of how to structure the financing. It was a separate legal entity from the housing authority. We had a for-profit blocker corporation, which allowed us to leverage other funding sources. And then, as I mentioned, then it's a for-profit that is wholly owned by a not-for-profit Surf Solar company. So this separate entity is the owner of the panels. And this type of structure is good if you're planning to do a large-scale project. Again, I think the underlying message to my presentation to you is this, that when you're looking at funding sources, you look to see what your funding sources are available, both federal and state, and then see how best to leverage those. And so it helps to work with an attorney who understands renewable energy, and it also helps to have, if need be, a consultant to help with the financial structure. And that in that case, that was the case for us. Next slide, please. So to give you some information on the cost of the system, the original projection was that it was just a little over $11.5 million to install. Under the California initiatives, the multifamily affordable solar housing, MASH for short, paid for roughly 40% of the cost of the project. We had some deferred fees, some deferred developer fees, which were subsequently paid. So, and then we pursued some 1603 grants through U.S. Treasury. And in today's world, you would potentially go through finding an investor for the solar investment tax credits. Okay, next slide, please. So this tells you a little bit about the California Solar Initiative. So again, you would check with your state to see what's available. The rules are constantly changing, and so and the funding sources definitely come and go. They are competitive. So if you're able to leverage multiple funding sources, that can give you a leg up when you're trying to compete for those funding sources. Next slide, please. Okay, so these were the steps that were required in order to get the funding sources through the state. And I really won't spend too much time here, but you can imagine every state has their process, and I would say the important key here is to find someone who does understand the funding sources that are available to you locally or at the state level. And then with that expertise, you can create an application that's competitive. Okay, next slide. So in this case, as you can see, the funding sources were pretty significant for this project with through the state. And so it's definitely something worth pursuing in your particular area. Next slide. Great. All right, so I covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but I know we have other speakers. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Bob, for that excellent presentation. And of course, Bob is going to be around for questions and answers. So thank you very much for your time with that too, because there may be some people that will be very interested in then interesting legal structures that you used. So thank you so much, and a great project. Thanks for doing that great work. So the next speaker, I think I have everything correctly now, will be from Puerto Rico, Alejandro Salgado Colon, the administrator of the Puerto Rico Public Housing Administration, Antonio Cordova of the HUD Puerto Rico Field Office assisting. Thank you. Nora, you could pull up those slides. Thank you for your patience, Alejandro. I'm just waiting for Nora to pull up the slides.
Good afternoon to all, and thank you guys for the opportunity to be able to present our projects, our future projects and plans aimed at energy efficiency and making our communities more resilient. So thank you for the opportunity. Okay, so I think we're good to go. So first of all, I just want to give you a quick overview of our agency. The Puerto Rico Public Housing Administration is the second largest PHA in the nation. We currently have about 53,000 public housing units in our inventory, and we also administer the HCV programs, about almost 13,000 HCV vouchers. So as part of our mission and the initiative that we have been working here in Pure PHA, once again, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to present to you guys what is our energy affairs program. So if you could please just forward in the slides.
Okay, I think we want to go past this.
Yeah,
right?
we went over that. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Next slide, please. Okay, so basically our energy affairs program, it has various components to be able to develop initiatives to create resilient public housing communities here in Puerto Rico. We definitely know the importance of being resilient after hurricanes Irma and Maria and other disasters that we have experienced in the past years. So we here are developing a few initiatives to make sure, first of all, that our projects are energy efficient, and also that we can take care of our communities during power outages. So as I said, as part of the various components that our program has, we definitely have or will be complying with our energy audit for this year, which basically it's an assessment of our current consumption and our current initiatives to be able to reduce that energy consumptions in our public housing projects here in Puerto Rico. Also, we will be developing various energy initiatives to be able to provide community centers to our public housing residents during disasters and long power outages. And we're also looking to provide emergency backup systems in our units, at least with one receptacle that's going to be available to be able to assist our residents and provide um, essential needs during power outages. So if you could please forward to the next slide, I'll go into it. And then our first first project as part of our program is working with our current or existing photovoltaic systems in our public housings. We currently have 2 public housing projects that have PV systems. So we're going to be working to rehabilitate this PV systems, repair, replace, and install new systems with battery backup and battery banks to be able to comply with net metering. Here you can see the details of our first project, rehabilitation project of an existing PV system in our Puerta de Tierra public housing development in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And we have our second project that it's a rehabilitation project of an existing PV system in El Coqui, which is the next slide, if you could please forward that. El Coqui Cataño, we are also going to be working with the rehabilitation of the PV system, as I said, benefiting 132 families that currently reside in this project. So that's the first step under our Energy Affairs program. And then our second initiative, if you could please move forward. Okay, so I was mentioning our community centers. So the second component of our project or our program is the Power Oasis pilot program, which basically aims to provide or achieve public housing community disaster resilience. So basically what we're looking for is to maximize solar power to achieve net zero utility electricity consumption in our projects and combine it with battery storage to provide resiliency at our public housing community centers in common areas during a long power outages. We here in Puerto Rico know that we are at risk of future events or storms that may affect our power grid. And so we are working and making sure that our communities are prepared for any future event. If you could please forward the slide. And before going into more details about our future projects, I just want to say that PRPHA's initiatives are also in line with other federal and local government initiatives, such as the Puerto Rico Electrical Power Reliability and Resilience Program, which provides assistance in the process of building reliable and resilient energy systems that will serve communities more efficiently. Also, the Community Resilience Centers Program, consolidated under the CDREF program, currently administered by the Department of Housing and local municipalities. And they basically are creating a network of community resilience centers across the island to support communities during disasters with the provision of critical functions and increasing social resilience. And also the new energy program, also ran or administered by the Puerto Rico Department of Housing, which will be implementing designing to assist eligible households, providing renewable energy installations, PV system installations, therefore mitigating the effects of energy lifeline failure or disruption during future events. If you could please move forward. Okay, so going back to our Power Oasis pilot program, basically what we're looking for is to provide reliable electricity within each community center at our public housing developments using solar power and battery storage directly to the residents, staff, and emergency qualified personnel. With this, we're going to minimize the electricity bills for PRPHA community centers with the local net metering programs. We're also going to improve the environmental outcomes by minimizing fossil emergency gensets used during extended power outages. And what we're looking is to provide reliable power in common areas, interior and exterior buildings, lighting during extended power outages. And basically, and most important, is to address our residents' primary needs during extended outages by offering a dedicated area which will be available for medical care, food provisions, and uninterrupted uninterrupted power supply for critical equipment. If you could please pass to the next slide. Thank you. Basically, to implement the Power Oasis program, we are looking into, or we will be using our own public housing capital funds. We're also going to be requesting or taking advantage of funds available at this time under the Solar for All initiative, which I must say we are almost ready to submit our notice of intent and requesting funding under the Solar for All. And we are also looking to other opportunities under funding available and administered by other agencies such as the Department of Energy. Basically, what the systems will be in our projects in regards to the PV. Here you have the information about typical design and what we will be working in each one of our projects. PV systems, battery backup. We have emergency generators already installed in our projects, and we're working to replace LED lighting, doors, windows, and more efficient fridge, ice machines, and other equipment in our community centers to be able to reduce and control consumption. Next slide, please. Okay, so our program basically has 4 components. It has the PV, battery, and genset for the community centers. We're also going to be working to illuminate or change the lighting in our stairs and exteriors to make sure we don't have future security issues due to power outages. And we're working to provide one electric receptacle per unit to be able to have an emergency backup in each one of our units for essential or critical equipment, fridge, lights, medical devices, etc. for each of our housing units. And we're also working and looking into the future to be able to use this PV systems to be able to provide electric vehicle chargers for our project administration staff. If you could pass to the next slide. So we are currently working to engage the necessary services and works to start with the implementation of this program in 10 public housing projects around the island. You can see which are the municipalities we will be working with and the amount of units we'll be impacting in this first phase, which is close to 2,000 units, 2,000 families, and almost 6,000 people who are currently living in our public housing developments here in Puerto Rico. You can see an estimated, the estimated amount or cost of this pilot program in this first 10 projects, which is close to $12 million. This is basically only covering the Power Oasis component, which is the PV installation, battery backup, and other initiatives. Next slide, please. So I was mentioning replacing our lighting. So that's the solar security lighting project, which basically after Hurricane Maria, we saw the impact of extended blackouts or power outages, and the security concerns that this brought to our residents. So our main objective is to provide an alternative solution to eliminate exterior areas using solar powered lamps at the main entrance of each residential structures and the stairs area. Next slide, please. Going into the battery backup for each unit, basically what we are trying to do is have at least one electric receptacle available per unit to be able to provide power or emergency backup to be able to, for our residents to be able to connect their refrigerators, their medical devices, the essential equipment they need during a long-term power outage. This will be included in the pilot program of our 10 public housing projects, and will be like I said, the installation of that electric receptacle which will be energized and backed up by the PV system we'll be installing. Next slide, please. Well, basically, this is an overview of our future plans here in the Puerto Rico Public Housing Administration. I once again appreciate the opportunity to be able to present this to you guys, and I'm available to answer any questions at the end of the round. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. And the next presenter will be Robert Capoletti of the Meriden, Connecticut Housing Authority.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning in some cases. Also with me is Jim Moran from Advanced Energy Group. We are a small housing authority in Meriden, Connecticut, and we have an admin staff of about 3 people, so we rely heavily on our consultants to help us with our projects. We're going to focus on a moderate rental property that we converted to 4% tax credits using HUD D4 money, 4% tax credits, and a variety of energy funds and investment funds from the state of Connecticut, Department of Housing, and HUD. Next slide, please. What you're looking at in the bottom right-hand corner is the city had a pretty large initiative to redevelop the downtown of Meriden, which had a series of flood problems, dilapidated, out-of-date housing, some of it public housing. So the Yale Acres project that I'm talking about today is just one of 8 projects that we undertook over the last 10 years. Getting through this. We also received a HUD, not the challenge grant, I just drew a blank on it. I'll think of it in a minute.
Choice Neighborhoods.
Choice Neighborhoods. Thank you, Jennifer. Sorry. The Choice Neighborhoods planning grant to help us with the initial planning of all these different projects. Yale Acres is about 160. Oh, can you do the next slide, please? Yale Acres is about 163 2, 3, and 1 bedroom apartments, mostly 2 and 3 bedrooms in 49 buildings, and a very nice residential area. It used to be an old farm. In 1950, they turned it into modern income housing through the state of Connecticut, which it had no continued subsidy. So over the years became obsolete and pretty much a mess. Without these funding, we wouldn't have been able to renovate it. One of the bigger problems we had is a series of unusual storms, winter storms, which knocked out the power for our residents for more than 2 weeks in some cases. Also left them with about 3 feet of snow in a couple other instances. Many of the residents lost their food, were unable to get out of their units. It was a pretty bad situation. Power lines were down. And more importantly, their oil furnaces didn't work at all. That same year, the oil prices went up ridiculously high, and our residents weren't able to afford the utilities. So we were challenged with what kind of energy would we bring in to the development in order to get rid of the oil, dependency on oil. We looked at natural gas, we looked at improving electricity connections, but unfortunately the utility infrastructure was very weak in this area, and our utility companies were very slow in responding. So we found Advanced Energy Group, Jim Moran, and he came in and analyzed the situation. And we thought that a combination of energy improvements to the buildings, a gut rehab, if you will, getting rid of the oil, bringing in geothermal and tying it with solar with the energy improvements of the envelope of the building would have significant savings for our residents and protect them for the future. One of the other interesting things is this is before there was battery backup. So we looked at possibly small generators to help in periods of power outages, but none of those are really feasible at the time. You can see in the slide, it shows that those are high energy usage. Low-income residents were paying between just for their oil bills, which ran their hot water and heating, depending on the size of the unit, between $3,200 and $5,400 a year in just oil bills. Did not include their electricity. Electricity was pretty expensive as well, as you can see. Next slide, please. This is a quick picture of how bad the units looked and how outdated they were. It had bad windows, bad roofing. Roofing was failing. All had smokestack chimneys in the middle of the units. Those were four-unit buildings, by the way. The chimney in the center serves two different units, so it created a whole bunch of problems in the oil. Next slide, please. So AEG helped us design this pretty ingenious plan, we thought at the time, including improving the building envelope, tightening up the windows, the doors, the roofing insulation, the wall insulation. In fact, we opened up some of these walls and found that there wasn't any insulation in them built in 1952. And some of them actually had blown-in insulation that had settled down to only about 2 to 3 feet from the ground. So that was really, when residents said that when it got cold out, the wind was blowing right through the walls, they weren't joking. Also created a geothermal heating and cooling system, which really was quite ingenious at the time, because our utility company, Yankee Gas, wouldn't bring gas to the property. So we didn't have any, unless we went all electric, we didn't have any other sources. So that was pretty interesting. And what we did is we created a series of wells throughout the property, tying into each other and going in and out of the buildings and thus the units, that created like an energy district. So we were able to use a lot less boreholes in the ground. Most of them are around 350 to 400 feet straight down. We used a proprietary 4.5-inch geothermal pipe that was much more efficient than the traditional 1.5-inch U-bend pipes. Also, of course, adding solar thermal hot water. Just briefly, we discontinued doing that because on our first model unit, the city inspectors made us cool the water when storing it. So we felt, well, why are we heating up the water with solar, then having to store it and cool it down, then reheat it again? They wouldn't let us keep stored hot water at the degrees that the solar was producing it. So we abandoned that in the rest of the project. Of course, energy efficient lighting and fixtures, and then energy efficient Energy Star appliances, including water-to-water heat pumps that provided air conditioning, hot water, and heat. And then the final key to this was a solar PV. And in this time of day, a lot of our commissioners didn't want to see solar panels all over this residential area. So we found a company called Luma, L-U-M-A, which had integrated panels, roofing shingles. And it worked out very well, gave us a much more durable product, and we had to replace the roofs anyway. So this kind of saved us some money while providing a better look for the property. Next slide, please. This kind of talks about the district that I mentioned, how we did a series of wells tying in and out of each building, reducing the number of pumps that we had, lowering the electrical consumption for the geothermal fields, and tying it into the solar panels that provided the energy for the geo field. I'd like Jim Moran. We got a couple of cool programs that AEG was able to bring to the table. And Jim, you want to talk about the DOE work groups? Jim, you're on mute. You have to turn off your mute.
Okay. Hello. We were able to join with three I call them here DOE working groups. They're actually National Renewable Energy Labs, solar, which is sponsored by the DOE, and they learned about our Luma building integrated photovoltaic roofing, and which you'll see in the next slide, and they were very interested in it because they had a working group on doing BIPV solar, integrating solar with buildings, And that's what this is. And it's very successful for us. And we are part of their working group for 3 years. Ultimately, we had about, I think, as many as 12 other BIPV roofing groups that were part of this. It was a national conversation that NREL had, and a DOE came up with a whole bunch of new guidelines and how to make building integrated photovoltaics more mainstream nationally, which just recently came out. They just recently put some guidelines out for that. We are also part of the same NREL DOE working group that was about how to get affordable housing solar, because most affordable housing was not getting solar. And we recommended highly working with through public housing authorities, because otherwise there was not amount of couldn't do one building at a time. There's just not enough time. So we wanted to work with housing authorities, which had lots of units to deal with. And finally, we were also asked to help. Our other work group was working on how to bring the pricing and the availability of solar down in all ways to make it more mainstream than it is now. We were able to apply for and receive Department of Energy Sunshot grant for our Yale Acres, for the model that you're seeing right now, and some of the other work we were doing a little later on. And we won both the grant and some money for technical assistance. And then out of the 205 projects that I got the grants, we were one of the 5 that was in the running for the final prize of $500,000. We were proud to be part of the 5, but we didn't win the $500,000. And they asked us to make a presentation at the DOE Solar Conference at NREL Solar Conference in Denver 4 years ago, which we did on our Yale Acres project here. And last year, 2 years ago, we did one on our solar greenhouse, which you'll see in a few minutes. And this year, we're presenting on our Green School program. AEGMHA is the Green School program. So we've been working with DOE, and now it's very nice to be able to say we're working as part of the HUD project also. Next slide, please.
Hey, Jim, I'd like to point out that you mentioned the education program. So we received also $170,000 for education and training program that helped train unemployed or underemployed residents of Yale Acres on how to assemble and install solar panels. So the solar shingles that you see on these buildings were actually installed by residents that graduated over the years and went on to their own other jobs outside of the affordable housing. So it's really a successful program.
Thank you, Rob. Rob, I don't, but what they should know is that we've also applied for, and we are currently in the running for an appropriation through our Congress, our Connecticut congressmen and senators, for the next year's budget for $2 million to take our training program we started for the geothermal and the solar at Yale Acres, and we want to make it a statewide program. And if we get the appropriation, that'll start in the fall. And we've already got our first project. We've already hired 5 inmates from the halfway house we're working on north of Hartford, and they're learning the solar and geothermal right now.
And just to point out, it's interesting because many housing authorities have a difficult time bringing people with criminal activity or criminal history, not activity, former activity, criminal history to our developments. And if I remember a few years back, HUD had a big initiative on reducing our requirements to try to help inmates who are reintegrating back in the community. So we didn't do a great job on that, but this is one of the steps that we've been taking now. And it took quite a few years to be comfortable with this, of helping that process. Anyway, back to the presentation. So this is an example of solar voltaic. This is our model building. We did a model building first to show our state agencies that we could actually pull this off and modeled our energy savings with this. And this is wasn't the end result, but this was the cheaper version of what we did. So we have solar shingles on the roof with the solar hot water on the left-hand corner of the roof, which we abandoned at later times, and with small bump outs on both sides of the building. But this building was designed as a passive house building. So it had really very good energy savings. It was 82%, if I recall correctly, Jim.
That's right. 82% of energy saved, 72% of cost saved. So it was very successful.
Next slide, please. We added the geothermal heating and cooling to the building envelope, tied in with the solar to add to our energy savings, and also provided renewable clean heating and cooling to our units and the residents once they learned how to use them. And we had to teach people it's a set it and forget it kind of thermostat. You don't have oil heat anymore. You don't turn it off when you go to work and then turn it back on when you get home. We kept them set between 70 and 72 all year long, and residents quickly learned how to take advantage of it and really enjoyed the quiet, clean, renewable heat and energy that they receive from this. Here it also talks about the 82% energy savings and 70% cost savings.
Yeah. And also, geothermal, for those who don't know, it is actually phase delayed solar energy. We're taking the solar energy captured in the earth, and the ground temperature at any part of the country is the average of the temperature for the year provided by the sun. And by doing the geothermal, the new heat pumps are always electric. So now our goal originally was to at least make sure every building had enough solar to power the solar heat pumps, the geothermal heat pumps. They make a great combination, which we think is a model.
It's ROAN.
Yeah.
That wasn't us.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Here we talked a little bit about the collectors and the process. This was more of the closed loop system and the hot water, which again we abandoned, but we wanted to show it anyway because it did add to our energy savings. And in other areas, not Meriden, Connecticut, where you have sophisticated inspectors who understand the process, this might be a very good system as well. Again, solar collectors, heating the hot water, storing it in energy efficient, large hot water tanks, run by, continue to run by the solar PV. And it has very good recovery time. So having a family development with nice hot water that got re-energized relatively quickly, and lots of kids who like to run the hot water for hours, this worked out very well. But unfortunately, we had to abandon that. Next slide, please. This talks a little bit about some of the energy savings over the years. I should add, this program started out as a $42 million project and ended as a $54 million project because of the time it took to combine all the different funding sources that we needed. And at this period of time, the state of Connecticut Department of Housing was revamping their lending programs. So it took us about 4 years to get their approval to get the funding needed to do this. And in that time, the costs went kind of crazy. And so you could see the difference there.
The geothermal and solar component of that was a little over $5 million, right, Rob?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this also shows the energy savings incentives that we made sure we capitalized on in order to get the rebates that we needed and the energy savings that we needed to complete the project. I might add that's not in this slide, is that the utility company, to bring gas and upgrade the electrical infrastructure, wanted to charge us $2 million, of which we just were beside ourselves that they would charge us to improve their own systems. So with the energy incentives that the state had forced upon the utility company, they ended up giving us one.
Rob, your voice went out. Should I pick it up? Can people hear me?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so I think Rob was about to say that the utility companies are now working with us, as is the state. The state originally didn't want to let any LIHTC funds be used for this, but now we've kind of educated uh, the state about the public housing authorities about these, and so now they're being regularly included in other state agency funding for public housing. Next slide, please.
Am I back on? There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what happened. I mentioned the utility company, they turned me off.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, Jim.
this is just a quick overview. Each of these next slides can be done very quickly. This was the plan. First, we put the plan for the geothermal field, and we did it. And this was a working. People were living here, so we had to do it in sections so that people could move from one building to another as they were done. The plan was to do first these geothermal fields here that you see, the little dots and the little lines. And we had a planned community center that connected it all together. And that's next slide, please. And then the most important thing Rob thought was that we needed to take put the utility lines underground, because the utility lines were coming down, as he said. So we took the utility lines and we put them in the ground. It's not completely done yet, but right now it is mostly done, so that we can move forward. I don't know what happened to the slideshow, and that's the red lines are all the utility lines. We put new transformers for every 2 buildings, and that's all connected now, and it's all underground, so there's no more fear of storms, winter storms or hurricanes. Next slide. That's the solar roofs. Not all the roofs are Luma. The ones facing the streets are mostly Luma. A lot of them are standard panels. There wasn't enough money in the budget to do everything with the steel roof Luma. And we added in besides the community center, we added in a cogen center so that we could become a microgrid and take all this solar, those lovely solar we've done. I think it was $2.2 million for the solar. And if you don't have a baseline energy, you can't keep the solar on in a blackout. So what was then cogeneration was planned to be the baseline generation to keep the buildings operating as a microgrid. You can see that they each got between 6 and 20 kilowatts of solar based on the size of the roof. Next slide. And then finally, the upcoming plans, we may do a little bit more solar with carports, as the Puerto Rican gentleman said that, and Santa Barbara said that's very helpful to get X-ray. We have in the very center, the pink thing is a solar, pink square will be a solar playscape. And we've now added a solar aquaponic greenhouse to the cogen center, so we can provide some fresh food and in what's basically a food desert. Next slide, please. And also we're now a microgrid, so we can, if there's a blackout, we can keep our power on. Although the cogen isn't built yet. When we're done, it will in the next year. I'm not going to go into this. This is our solar aquaponic greenhouse. The only thing to say about it is, besides providing some fresh food for the units in what's basically a food desert, it also produces twice the energy it uses. The entire skin of the building is solar. There's fish on the bottom and plants on the top, and what we're also doing. Our first one is actually, we've done another building with geothermal and solar in Bristol, Connecticut, about 20 miles away, and there isn't enough room for solar because it's got a historic building and they won't let us use the roof for solar. So this greenhouse will provide the additional electricity that's needed for the conversion from gas to geothermal heat pumps with electric heat pumps.
Hey, Jim, let me add. So what's also very important about this solar greenhouse, it's really, it's not really a greenhouse where light goes through it. It's done with LED lighting and some passive lighting coming through, but also the infrastructure or the structure of the building, the exoskeleton, because it's all solar panels and siding, is that it qualifies for a lot of the IRA energy incentives.
Yeah.
So a very good portion of this building large portion of this building will be paid for through those energy incentives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this will also engage the residents who live in the development to eat healthier, grow healthier food, and get engaged in energy savings. So we hope that this is kind of an educational training program while using solar as the attraction.
As part of the BIPV program we're part of, the Building Integrated Photovoltaics, that was part of the reason that this came to be, because all the siding, all the walls, outside walls, they're actually the solar racking. You can see in the top corner, that's where the infrastructure is. The walls are actually the racking the solar goes on. And so the walls themselves qualify for the tax credits and the rebates and the rapid depreciation. So a huge portion of the building is financed by the incentives. We should move to the next slide unless we have something, Rob. And this, just like the gentleman in Puerto Rico wants to have community centers in hurricanes, this is our community center that isn't built yet. It's where we're talking about next year, Rob, right?
Yes.
And it's got its own solar. It's got a standard solar roof, and the roof on the right-hand side will be a Luma roof. And I'll let you tell them about that, Rob, because this has been Rob's dream since I met him in 2012. And
as we learned about the other energy incentive programs, this program is kind of growing. So we have a full education and training center in this community center, focusing on the students that live in the housing that we have here, and after school programs, daycare programs, education and training programs, as well as physical education programs, integrating a whole healthy person as opposed to just the mind or just the body. And part of the gardening program is helping the families working with the local health center to grow food as medicine, to help reduce on the kind of asthma medications or obesity issues, anxiety issues, and try to grow foods to replace the chemical medications that they're taking in place of that. But more importantly, the entire community center is run off of solar and cogen systems that are independent of outside energy. So in an energy shortage, Yale Acres, because of the solar and cogen systems, will run in the dark when the rest of the community is out of power. And all the residents will have that benefit. So that's really important for us because they were kind of left out for so long. And our community had a difficult time figuring out how to help this development. So, and it took us quite a while. It wasn't an easy solution because there was so many groups. I guess they wouldn't fight us, but they were resistant to providing assistance because there's a lack of funding to support it. So with AEG's help, we were able to find a bunch of ingenious ways to do that. And also with the energy incentives out there that came in because of solar or passive house design or Energy Star ratings or better, we're able to get assemble lots of little pots of money that added up to a big difference. So I think that's really important.
And between the community center, the greenhouse, and a few other things, we're actually providing jobs for those, especially teenagers in the summer and whatnot. The greenhouse is going to hire almost probably 30 half-time jobs in the summer, but we're providing a lot of work for these 172 housing units, about 800 people. So anyway.
By the way, it also adds 10 other housing units as part of the community center. The town made us acquire all the other housing units that were around our property to integrate them because we had to take over the streets in order to have the geothermal and electricity cross the streets. So we had to acquire the streets in the meantime. Another curveball we were thrown, but people were very helpful in getting that done.
The last thing I'd like to point out is all of this is basically a microgrid. And for those of you who aren't familiar with microgrids, it's basically the ability to have your utilities stay on in a blackout. The solar stays on because of the baseline cogen. We have other power sources we're bringing in steam. But the bottom line is that this is a microgrid, and the IRA has a lot of funding for the next 10 years to help build microgrids. And it's not actually in the IRA, it's in the infrastructure grant. The infrastructure grant for the grids includes money for projects like this that take the pressure off the grid. So that's what we've been working on since 2012. And we're 80% of the way there.
Yes.
Great.
Next slide.
So, Rob, I just have to do, this is fantastic. I don't want to rush you, but we just have to be mindful also of Mr. Marshall's presentation.
Yeah, this is the last thing. And this just was something to engage the residents in the energy. The AEG sponsored was basically an interactive educational kiosk for the children that eventually got their parents involved as well. We had a hard time engaging the parents, so AEG said, let's engage the children first. So they actually created these banners throughout the property of what energy meant and home meant, and it really started to work well.
My favorite thing about the entire thing is I had to explain to to everybody in the city what we were doing. And I said, this geothermal and solar stuff is actually so easy a third grader can describe it. And I said, here's a third grader to describe it for you. And he actually made our presentation for us based on his work. We're doing this artwork. It was great.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate the opportunity to present.
Great. Thank you so much for your amazing presentation, Rob. And also to your consultant, that was very inspiring. Thank you. So for our last presentation, we have Charles Marshall of the HUD Energy Branch. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for putting this together. Great information from our presenters, and excited to see some of the great opportunities that are coming up. While the slide presentation is coming up, I will be dropping some stuff in the chat as well, so that you can go and look at some of these resources while we're talking, as well as hearing some of the information. So when you get the slide, of course, you'll get it anyway. Next slide, please. So solar decarbonization benefits. Solar, we're talking about solar coming up. The sun has been around over 4.6 billion years. I don't think anybody on here is as old as that. You might be, but if you're not, then it'll probably be around for a while. So it is a great source of energy, plays a crucial role in decarbonization efforts. And the solar available for all people is one of the things that we're excited about the solar energy or renewable energy, as you've heard some with the geothermal as well. But it opens up the ability for all social structures, all groups to have access to this energy. Everyone can have access to it. Of course, you've got to build the infrastructure to do it, but you have access to it. And there are some benefits for it because it supports meeting everyone's needs, avoids using carbon emitting fuels, the revenue that you can generate from excess usage or excess production. And when paired with other resources, as you saw in some of the presentations, works well. For example, the battery storage and other efforts. Solar helps us meet our renewable energy goals as well in the portfolio. Next slide, please. There are a number of platforms. You saw some today, the solar shingles, as it was indicated with Meriden, and solar thermal. You also heard some of that, but there's solar windows. There's some utility scale solar farms. There's parking. There's ground mount. You may have seen these, some rooftop. Next slide. There's also some other technologies like we've seen the landscaping, solar trees, solar mats, street lighting, and even solar walls where there's solar, and you saw that on the greenhouse earlier. So it comes in a number of formats, and what we're also excited to hear is that the efficiency, the energy and water efficiency, like the exciting projects that Meriden is doing, as Jim and Rob presented earlier, with the geothermal, and they looked at the envelope, they looked at energy efficiency, lighting, Energy Star appliances, just a number of things that help make the whole entitled, so the whole solution work even better for the property owners and the property managers. Next slide. Couple key terms I just want to talk about as we talk about some opportunities that are available here. Power purchase agreements, there is a whole lot about power purchase agreements, but we're going to keep it simple. There's on-site PPAs or power purchase agreements where the actual location of the PV is actually on-site. There's an agreement with a third-party developer on how they will be produced, where it will go. Will it be used on-site? Will it go up on the grid for the utility provider? What agreement is there with the utility provider? Number of things that go into that. And then we also aware of make you aware of the virtual PPA. Sometimes they're called synthetic. And this is where there is an offsite location for power purchasing. And you're able to participate that. And of course, community solar, where there's a third party that develops the solar, and you're able to enter into that with subscriptions. And of course, on-site solar, where the owner actually develops the solar production and actually will use it or may sell it as well. And of course, we mentioned some battery usage, net metering. Won't get deep into that with this limited time, but all of these are definitely key issues that you would want to be concerned with. As mentioned earlier, sounds like Merritt, Joe, and Jim and Rob had some fun with utility providers, so they could probably tell you a lot about some of these things. Next slide, please. As mentioned in many of these presentations from the County of Santa Barbara, with Bob and Alejandro, with Puerto Rico, and as well as with Rob, who talked about some rehabilitation and retrofitting, and even the things that went into Meriden. There are a number of ways to finance it. Ultimately, how are you going to pay for it? We're excited about some of the new opportunities, and I'll share some today. Some will be on some of the websites that I will share with you, as well as resources. And some will, some work for you and some won't, but we definitely encourage you to look. So there's self-funded, where you actually provide the capital. There are grants that you will apply and receive funding that you don't have to pay back. There are some loans, either low interest, no interest, and even some forgivable loans. So you need to look at some of those opportunities, as well as the PPA, VPPA that I just mentioned. There are tax credits, particularly as we're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, some new opportunities opening up with that. And then for those that are public housing on the call here today, there are some incentive programs that you can use with all of these as well. And we'll talk a few minutes about that. Next slide, please. So with solar, there are many federal and state governments that are really pursuing solar. And there are a number of tribal areas where there's vacant land that can be used for solar. And you heard in some of the presentations in terms of siting and finding places to actually do the solar. So there's great opportunity in many places. There's about 7 billion that has been announced for NOFOs for Solar for All. It's released by the EPA on June 28th. That's just a few days ago. So very exciting time to have these resources available. And also it's available to housing authorities if you're on the call as well. The Inflation Reduction Act established two provisions that allow states and local governments as well as nonprofits and other eligible entities to access some of these resources. And they're coming from a number of places. They're coming from HUD has some, For multifamily, then you have some that is coming from Department of Energy, and then you have some that is coming from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And then, of course, recently with some of the new announcements, we're excited to hear with the direct pay that's coming from Treasury with those opportunities. So I'll talk a few minutes about that here in just a second. But there's the federal solar investment tax credit was extended until 2032. And then there are also other resources that are coming from states and other local entities, both profit and nonprofit, and so there are a number of things that are out there. I will share a resource in just a few minutes that will help you locate some of those. Next slide. The new direct pay. This is exciting. I mean, folks, this is really exciting. This is coming out with the Inflation Reduction Act, and this is now where there's now 12 tax credits that are eligible for what we're calling direct pay. What is happening is that entities that used to not be able to take advantage of the tax credit are now able to monetize and to be able to take advantage of the tax credit, what's called elective pay, directive pay. There's a number of links here to help guide you through that process. There are some information that's available to help guide you through that. And of course, this is fresh. I mean, it is like within a few weeks of being announced. So this is really exciting, and we definitely encourage you to put it in your sandbox, in your toolbox, as you look to develop solar and other renewables within your projects. Next slide, please. There are community solar subscriptions that are available in a lot of states. That's all I'm gonna say. You see some of them here. There are links actually when you get the slide presentation, you'll be able to click on some of those links, or you may even Google your site or search on the internet if you don't use Google. I know other people use other browsers, so whatever you use. But definitely there's some resources that are available with community solar. And if you're not familiar with community solar, basically there is a third party that develops the solar project, and they sell subscriptions for a certain amount of time, terms. And from those subscriptions, you're able to reap the benefits of the production of that particular facility. So it actually evens the field somewhat for those who may not have the skills, or they may not have the resources to develop their own solar projects. You can participate in other solar projects and still reap benefits from that. Next slide. I did share in the chat this resource that I want to thank Jennifer and Alexis for pulling this together. Excellent resource with a number of funding navigators to help locate funds. And as you notice on the slide where you can actually click on the some of the links that are in the pictures to go deeper and get a number of resources that are available to you. Also information to help you guide and build your projects as you're working with your team and you're working with consultants and experts in the field, that it will give you some information to help you to develop those projects. And very good tool. So definitely encourage you to use that. Next slide as well. Also want to let you know about the ONAP tribal, those that are from Native American or Indian housing that are on the line as well. There are a number of resources, and I'm dropping that in the chat so you can look at those resources. There are a number of resources that are available: sustainable construction in Indian country, tribal climate resilience program information. There's a program through University of Oregon, tribal climate change. Just a number of resources that are available to you, as well as some energy evaluation tools and some other connections that are out there on that website. So we definitely encourage you to utilize those resources that have been pulled together, definitely from that office. And we want to thank them for pulling it together for you, but encourage you to use it. We encourage you to use it. Next slide, please. So from the Office of Public Housing, we have been updating. Some of you have probably remember the other site that was there, and we have updated it and are still updating it and adding content to it. I've just dropped that into the link as well. And on this site, there are a number of things. It talks about our programs. And so you will see information about programs that I'm going to talk about in just a second that are available through the operating fund. The energy performance contract, the small rural frozen rolling base, rate reduction incentive, utility partnership program that are all available to some of the PHAs, depending on what size, where you are, those type things. I'll talk about that in a second. But definitely some information for you, and we're finding that there's great opportunity there to mix with some of the other funding that's coming as well, to help you build those projects and support those projects. Also on this website are information about systems. So you heard a number of things about systems, like the building envelope projects that Meriden did, the solar projects that were done in Puerto Rico, and a number of the energy programs, and even the County of Santa Barbara, who grouped different funding mechanisms together as they did projects, and the retrofit projects that they push forward. You actually can get some information and some links to help get you going if you starting from scratch, and or if you're more seasoned. Great resources there. One thing that I do want to share, for those that are on the line, you lucked up today because you have a link that I just dropped in there called The Desire. And this website is actually managed by North Carolina University, and they've been doing it for over several decades. And so some of the folks on the line probably already know. All you need to do on this website, you can link it through our website, which is the Energy Branch website, or you can go to the link that I just dropped in the chat, put in your zip code, and it will list out grants, loans, policy, a number of things. I really applaud them for keeping it up to date. And so this is an effort, if you're trying to locate what grants, what loans, what other opportunities are available in your area, in addition to some of the things that you will see on these other websites that I'm sharing with you. But you'll see a list of them and links. And so you can find out more information that may be available from your state, may be available from some local municipalities and other entities. So definitely encourage you to utilize that. The next slide, please. So with public housing, there is an opportunity. There have been questions about PPAs and solar. So through the Public Housing Procurement Handbook 7630, that these contracts, which typically are 10 to 25 years, are approvable through your field office. This goes out to the public housing authorities that are on the line here. And so there was a question for many about contracts over 5 years and the procurement requirements, and this does comply to 2 CFR 20319, which says that if there is no practical alternative, then the contract may be approved at the field office through the field office general counsel. So in cases for PPAs, power purchase agreements, these are approvable. They must be approved through your local field office. And for those that are approved, I've got good news for you. There are some additional benefits that are available through the incentive programs that are through the operating fund for public housing. So the PPA itself is approvable, but also if you have a PPA, next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the incentives that are available to you. The rate reduction incentive, and this is actually in the notice. The most recent one is 2023-17 that came out Friday. That whenever you're doing a PPA, a virtual PPA, community solar, on-site solar that is has approved contract from your field office, then you are eligible for this incentive. So for the on the solar credits that appear on your bill, you can receive up to 50% savings from those solar credits that you can apply for each year that will be added to your subsidy. In addition, if you have an EPC that was done in conjunction with the rate reduction incentive, you can receive 100%. So if you have more questions about that, you can definitely reach out to us. We'll be glad to talk to you about it. We've got a number of people who are working, and we actually have the next request date for the upcoming funding year will be July 31st of this year, in a couple days, in a couple weeks. So if you're interested in that program, that's 50% of the solar credit can be claimed on the operating subsidy for the rate reduction incentive. And so we encourage you to utilize it. It's available to you. Next. The Utility Partnership Program. This is actually a program with guidance through 2018-20, the notice that is out, which you can do energy conservation measures for up to 20 years using the savings, funding them with the savings through your utility provider. And so this program is available to you, and we definitely would be willing to work with you if you had questions about it. So a number of utility companies have energy services areas, energy services programs where they actually will develop energy and water projects, solar projects, renewable projects. So this is an opportunity to utilize this program to work with your utility provider. Next slide. The EPC program, which is one of the longstanding programs for public housing. And this is where, similar to the UPP, this is where savings from the projects, the lighting, the building envelopes, the water retrofit projects where you're doing water efficiency projects, all of the savings from those can go to help finance the projects using either a ESCO, energy services company, and there are a number of fantastic ones that are out there willing and ready to work with you and help you develop projects. Or you may use a consultant and develop it as the housing authority. So you do have that ability to do it either way. But we definitely encourage you with this program to use the ESCO or use a consultant to develop your projects. You can finance these projects for up to 20 years using the savings from what you're implementing. So it is a definite way to also bundle some of those other incentives that you heard mentioned here today, to bundle those together in order to help finance your project, get more bang out of your buck. Great opportunities available through the program. So we definitely encourage you to look into that as well. Next. And there is one that maybe is coming up soon, but if not, the energy performance contracts also can be done outside for those that are not in public housing. So the performance contract is just a mechanism of financing some of the energy conservation and water conservation projects using the savings. There is a link where you can find out more. Some are done through states, some are done through municipalities, some are done through a number of other ways as well. So we definitely encourage you to look into that if you are not public housing on the call today. Next slide. There we go. This is what I was looking for. So the small rural frozen rolling base for those housing authorities that are 550 units or less, 550 units or less, and are classified as a rural housing authority, you can elect to be in this program each year, which the election process is very simple. You basically tell HUD that you want to participate, and we said you are participating. And what that does is it freezes your utility subsidy for up to 20 years. So any savings that you expect from any of the energy conservation measures or water conservation measures that we've mentioned here, any of them will, if that reduce your actual utility costs, those savings, 100% of those savings can be retained by the housing authority and used toward eligible operating and capital expenses. 100. So basically, if your maintenance person is doing water retrofits, putting in new toilets, you expect that to happen in the next year, and you're a small rural housing authority, we encourage you to participate in this program because you're going to have savings in water, and you will be able to use and keep those savings for up to 20 years if you participate in this program. Otherwise, the savings actually revert back to Treasury. So we encourage those housing authorities that are looking for a method. You can use other programs to do renewables. You can do water projects. You can do electrical projects. But to enter into the program, you basically let HUD know that you want to participate. And to get out of the program, you let us know annually when the period opens. We have a window for participation. The announcement should be going out soon. Then you say, well, we don't want to be in the program. If you don't want to be in the program, you wait 4 years before you can enter again. Very simple. The next slide, please. Solar job creation, and we're excited to hear examples of that today. There's a number of resources that are provided, but with the new monies that are coming out, the new opportunities that are coming out, being able to develop jobs and develop the workforce along with developing the solar production, which saves, reduces the carbon emissions as well as provides resiliency, but also adds to the development. And you heard even a mention of putting a project in that actually grows vegetables. Awesome. That is a wonderful way to bundle together resilient and sustainable projects together to actually help a community be better. So this is available to you, but the solar workforce must grow from the current 250,000 to 1.5 million by 2035, and to meet the goals for solar deployment. So as often as we can get the solar job creation included in the projects, it helps us get closer to that mark. The next slide, please. All right, I got a little bit over on 8 minutes, but if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at PIH Energy Branch at HUD.gov. Next slide, or you may contact some of the HUD contacts, Alexis Pelosi, Jennifer Gottlieb Alzari, and Danielle Shop. All are listed here on the slide, and if you have questions, we definitely would encourage you to reach out to us. So thank you. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Charles, for your excellent presentation and your enthusiasm. I'm so sorry that we have gone over time, but we do still have presenters, I believe, on the line. If any presenter is not here and had a conflict, I can field the question for them and get back to the requester with the answer. I also want to note that many people have requested the recording and the slides. I will send them to everyone who's on the meeting invite. If the recording is long and has trouble getting past the firewall, that may be the only problem, but we will certainly try to send those all out. The slide decks will be no problem. We'll also load them on the Build for the Future site. So we have in Charles's presentation the link for that. He also put it in the chat, so you can also find the materials there. So I want to open up for questions at this time for any presenter. Thank you. Just jump right in if you have a question.
I had a question for Alejandro. This is Jim Moran, the AEG. I sent you a quick message. We've actually been down to Puerto Rico earlier this summer and had several meetings with a couple of cities. So in Ponce and Barranquitas. I'd love to talk to you about them at some point.
Alejandro, I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that, Jim. Sure. Please reach out and I'll reach out after the call and we'll coordinate some time. Okay.
Yeah, great. That's great. That's great. I had a
Okay, the floor is still open for questions. Thank
Hello?
you. Philip Brown,
Yes.
go ahead.
I have a couple questions. One for Alejandro. With the one receptacle you're going to have in for the emergency for everyone in there, are you going to have recommendations besides extension cords that people can use? Because with just one outlet, if they have different medical equipment or refrigerator or lamps, they will need to run
Yes,
extension cords to those items. Are you guys recommending the necessary, the proper cords and stuff for that?
Yes, definitely. There will be some instructions about the use of the receptacle. Obviously, there's an important part that's the education to the residents on the use of this emergency backup receptacle, and we should be able to control the usage and the consumption of that emergency line when necessary.
Thank you, Alejandro. Interesting project. Looks very interesting. And this is, I guess, for Jim Moran.
Yeah.
Yes. With what you guys are doing up there, the geothermal loop and everything, you said you're finding that to be much more energy efficient, combining geothermal with the present heat pump systems. Is that something that you guys are, now that the heat pump systems are more available and going to be able to be put in these places, is that something that you guys are looking to install now, more using the regular heat pump systems or geothermal going forward on other projects? And what's your recommendation for dealing with towns' long permitting processes, or electrical companies' long permitting process for these projects?
Well, to your last point first, yeah, as I told you, we had took quite a bit of time, and I think Rob's still on the line too. Rob luckily did most of the negotiating with the utility companies. At first, it was a little bit like pulling teeth because this was 2012 and things weren't as advanced as they are now. Over the last 10 years, however, both the utility company and the state, the state housing authority, both really have warmed to the ideas that we were doing back in 2012 and 13. And I don't think it's going to be as hard as it used to be. But this is still really new. Technology is still new. The cities and even the utility companies, they're just learning like we are, because these are new. Every new kind of system has new problems. The fire department wants the solar to be safe for their fire people to get around if there's a fire. There's all kinds of little things, and so there's a lot of regulations that are new. But it's just because it's the beginning of a process. So I think you have to build a little bit of that into this. That not get frustrated with the utility company or the cities, because, like I say, they're just, some of them are just learning. Some of them more than they do, unfortunately, because they haven't had maybe that many solar applicants or that many geothermal applicants. The geothermal heat pumps are we started out doing geothermal. We were doing solar, but the first slide we had, reduce before you produce, that was our calling card. That was our we didn't want to start putting solar on buildings until we were reducing the energy loads first, because otherwise we were just wasting that energy, and at that time it was costly. I mean, solar costs about a third of what it used to cost, and the incentives are much better now than they used to be. So the geothermal heating and cooling, in most instances, is going to, that savings, that's 40% of a household's energy costs, is the HVAC. And even in areas that don't use heat, like in Puerto Rico, the AC and hot water, you can do AC and hot water. Those are both either lacking or either they don't exist at all or they're very expensive. So that makes a great, and then of course the heat pump is electric. Now we use some what they call split systems just for in various places, just to compare air source heat pumps and geothermal heat pumps. And I'm not putting down any other industry, because there are uses for air source heat pumps, but there is nothing that compares to the water to water geothermal heat pumps. You're taking 51-degree water from the ground, 50-degree temperature from the ground. Air conditioning, really all you need is a duct and a fan when you're starting with 51-degree water. So the heat pumps operate very, very, very little. And in the winter, you're starting with 51-degree water in our latitude, instead of 0-degree air or 32-degree air. And all across in North Carolina, it's I think the temperature is 62 degrees, the ground source heat temperature. In Florida, it's in the 70s. Any one of those is way better than starting with 0-degree air or 32-degree air in the winter, or 100-degree air or 90-degree air or 80-degree air in the summer. So they represents a tremendous savings. And then it's the additional that the heat pump is electric. So it's not a gas heat pump. It's, so if you have a split system, you're generally using gas for the heat, and you're using electricity for the air conditioning. And the price of gas is going up, but I mean, but we're making it electric. But we want to provide the units that we provide at least enough solar power to make up the difference in converting from gas to oil or gas to electric, or whatever it is to electric. Some places use propane in New England. So that we started out just trying to balance the two, putting enough solar in to basically make it the operating cost of the heat pump free after your investment. And now once we've gotten into the microgrids and the larger installations, we can make sure that the buildings have all of their electricity with power. And like Alejandro is talking about, we like to, while we haven't done it all the time, we like to have a system where if there is an emergency that we don't have quite enough power for right now, there are specialized outlets in each house for the refrigerator, the heat pumps, and and a few household necessities. So if you build that into it, then your solar and cogen need is a lot less. But I hope that answers your question. I consider the heat pump one of the most unknown inventions of the 20th century, and the government is investing heavily in it. Not only are the incentives crazy, the incentives are crazy for the geothermal heat pumps. They're good for the air source heat pumps. The geothermal heat pumps in Connecticut, it's $4,500 a ton. So if you have a 1.5 ton unit in a heat pump in a 1,000 square foot apartment, you're going to get a rebate of 1.5 times $4,800. $7,200 rebate for the heat pump on top of the tax credits and whatnot. And in Massachusetts, it's $5,800. Every state's a little different. The federal rebate is $800. But I'm not pushing it. I know there's a solar conference, but reducing before you produce is still going to be the best long haul strategy, especially for a housing authority when you have responsibility for so many units that use so much energy, especially the older units that use a lot more energy. So maybe insulation costs too much. Sometimes windows cost too much, although we find that putting in new windows really reduces the size of the geothermal field and the size of the heat pumps in the units. I've spent a lot of time on websites just answering people's questions about heat pumps because the people don't understand them. And now the federal government, besides everything else in the IRA, federal government has they're using the Defense Production Act. They're spending $500 million on the Defense Production Act to improve and make heat pumps mainline in the country. By improving, I don't mean that they don't work now; they work beautifully. But right now, sometimes there's only limited sizes. There's various things that can be improved upon for the future, and that's gonna make a huge difference moving forward. And I'm only going on about the geothermal because of the intricate connection between that and solar. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Jim. That was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to respect the time of the presenters that are called on for Q&A, because I know everyone's busy and it was a long meeting. I can offer this, since we've gone over into the Q&A time, is that anyone who has a question can certainly email it to me, and I can direct it to the presenter and sort of get you back the answer if that is something that works. Then I think that might be the best way to go, rather than assume that the presenters, don't have a conflict with the time overage. But so again, my email is probably the one that you got the invite from. It's Jennifer. I will put it in the chat here, actually. Okay, great. Hope I spelled my name correctly. Yes. And I want to thank everyone for coming, and especially for the presenters. If we could give them a little bit of a Teams icon, like applause, hearts, and love for all their time and energy that they spent here today. We really, really appreciate it. And these kinds of events, I really believe, are very important in order to educate all our stakeholders. Peer-to-peer is probably one of the best ways to raise awareness and raise capacity. So we always rely on our stakeholders to come to the table and share their stories, and really appreciate their willingness to do so and the time that they give for that. So thank you all very much for coming today, and we will certainly be making the slide deck and the recordings available both through email, and if the recording is too much memory, everything will be loaded on the Build for the Future site.
Jennifer, I'd also like to
Yes.
thank Charles. That was a